understand every, I couldn't understand everything that the guy said. Host who was explaining who the composers were and all. It was hard for me to follow what he was saying. It would have been nice to have it all in a connected program.
That's true.
Maybe next time they could do that.
That's a great suggestion.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Let's get started. Can everyone see the source sheet? Okay. That's a little bit too big because you don't get any English. Okay, so we are talking tonight about Pruzbul. And first we're just going to go through the various issues that bring us up to the point of perhaps needing one. And then we'll talk a little bit about the Pruzbul itself. And at the end, just talk through a little bit about what the procedures will be if anyone wants to complete one. Okay, so as we're aware, hopefully by this point, this year is a Shemitah year. So that impacts us mostly with regards to produce from Israel. When we were in Israel earlier this year, it was really quite complicated. Not complicated, but it was, there's major restrictions on what you're allowed to eat that was grown in Israel and various halachic loopholes around it. Some that are, each one has its advantages and its disadvantages. For us in America, it's a little bit relevant as far as when Israeli peppers or Jaffa oranges make their ways to the supermarkets. We will feel it also this coming Sukkot when our lulav and etrog provider will only be selling etrogim grown in Morocco and not those grown in Israel in order to avoid any issues of Shemitah. So that's where we most commonly encounter Shemitah, but there's also at the end of the Shemitah year, the notion of Shmitat Ksafim. That's in addition to the land not being able to work the land or engage in commerce of the produce, there's also a matter of forgiving of loans. Right? It's kind of interesting how the student debt forgiveness coincided with this time of the year. All the questions that are being asked about student debts, we can ask about loans in general under the rubric of Shemitah. So the Torah tells us as follows. This also appears in Sefer at the end of Sefer Vayikra and Parshat Bahar. But this is from Sefer Devarim. Miket Sheva Shanim Taseh Shemitah. Every 7 years you should make a Shemitah, a sabbatical. Zedavar HaShemitah. This is what Shemitah is. Shamot kol ba'al mashe yado asher yasher bereyehu. Lo yigos et reyehu vet achiv ki kara Shemitah laHashem. You should remit all loans. Creditors shall remit the due that they claim from their fellow Israelites. Lo yigos et reyehu. It's translated as they shall not dun their fellow Israelites or kin. Meaning they shouldn't taunt them or in any way exploit them to get the loan back, because it is a Shemitah sabbatical for Hashem. You are allowed to force or I'll say exploit, dun. I don't even know what dun means in English, but you can do that to a non-Jew. But to your fellow Jew, to your brother, you must remit the loan. There'll be no poor among you because God will bless you. Only if you will follow the word of God, which I command you today. Right, God blessed you, etc. And then we skip down to verse number 9. Hishamer lecha pen yedavar im levavcha bli al lemor karva shnat hasheva shnat hashmita v'ra'a Eincha ba'achicha evyon v'lo titein lo v'kara alecha el Hashem v'haya becha chet. You must be very careful lest you harbor the base thought, bli'al, to say, the Shemitah year is approaching, and I don't want to extend a loan to my fellow because I know the Shemitah is going to cancel it. That's a grave sin. Naton titain lo v'lo yeira levavcha betitcha lo. You must give willingly and happily and not with any cold heart. Ki biglal hadavar hazeh yivarecha Hashem lokecha b'chol ma'asecha v'chol mishlach yedecha, because for this matter, God will bless you. Okay, so there are three halachic issues at play when it comes to Shemitah as relates to loans and money. Number one is collecting the loan during Shemitah or post Shemitah. Number two is lo tigos, not to dun, not to pressure anyone, not to hold it over them. However, we're going to translate that.
Yeah, the Rebbe translates exact repayment.
Okay, do not exact repayment. Don't demand that they repay once if the loan's been canceled. And then the third is this notion of blial, of not having base thoughts, right? Not withholding or refraining from extending loans, knowing that Shemitah is approaching. So there's these three issues that are at play, and the Torah tells us over and over again that if we do this, then we will be blessed. That this will be the source of blessing, and God will provide for us. But obviously, this is easier said than done, and to forgive a loan is quite, is not so simple. So again, first I want to just get into a little bit of the halachic background. So one interesting issue is the discussion. I remember when the first year I was working as a rabbi, I believe it was a Shemitah year, maybe it was the second year, and I was freaking out because it was like Erev Rosh Hashanah and I hadn't done Pruzbuls yet, and I hadn't even looked into it. No one was speaking about it, and I was freaking out, as do many at the beginning of the Shemitah year. So this would have been a year ago. And it turns out that the halacha is no, right? As we see in the Sifrei number 2, that this Shmitat Ksafim, this releasing of the debts, occurs at the end of the Shemitah year, not at the beginning. Okay, so there are minority opinions that say it does happen at the beginning and not at the end. Chabad is generally strict that way. So if you are in a Chabad community, they might have done Pruzbuls at the beginning of this year as well. But most hold that it only applies at the end of the Shemitah year, which is why we're talking about it now. You might have thought Shemitah is over. And that's codified by the Rambam in number 3. Ein shvi'it mishametet ksafim ela b'sofa. So the Shemitah, the 7th year, releases debts at the end. Shene'emar miketz sheva shanim ta'aseh. It says miketz at the end, or every 7 years you should do this. V'zeh davar hashmita v'sham hu omer miketz sheva shanim b'moed shnat hashmita b'chag haSukkot. It uses the same term when it talks about the Hakel ceremony that took place every 7 years during Sukkot, when the king would read to the entire nation from the Torah. Masham achar sheva af hashmitat ksafim achar sheva. Just as the Hakel ceremony took place at the end of the 7 years, so too Shemitah Ksafim, the releasing of the debts, takes place at the end of the 7th year. So when exactly does it start? It starts when the sun sets on the night of Rosh Hashanah. Okay, so when we gather in shul in a couple of weeks on Sunday night to begin Rosh Hashanah, that's when the debts are canceled. What's the status of Shemitah in our days? Okay, so we know that we did a shir on Heter Mechira or on workarounds of the produce issue at some point. So we know that the reason we're able to rely on whatever leniencies there are is because Shemitah of the land is, quote, only derabanan in our day. It's only of rabbinic nature. What's the status of Shemitah Ksafim, of forgiving the debts? So the Gemara in Kiddushin tells us, Rabbi Omer, וזה דבר השמיטה, שמות בשתי שמיטות הכתוב מדבר. This is the matter of Shemitah. You shall release or relinquish. The Torah talks about two different releasings. Achat Shmitat Karka, v'achat Shmitat Ksafim. One is a Shemitah of the land, a release of the land, and one is a release of money. Bizman shata meshamet karka, ta meshamet ksafim. Cheryl, I think we're getting some feedback from you. Okay, is that better? Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So when Shmitat Karka is in effect, then Shmitat Ksafim is in effect. When the releasing of the land is applicable, then the releasing of money is applicable. But if you are not bound to release the land, you are not bound to release the money. Why do you want to learn the connection that way? Maybe it should be that it's about the same place. That just as the Shemitah of the land applies only to Israel and not to anywhere else, maybe that would be true with loans as well, that loans are only canceled if they're in Israel. They say no, because it says, because it is called a Shemitah to God in any place, in any case. So that's how the Gemara learns out that it's, on the one hand, the applicability of Shemitah Ksafim, of releasing of debts, is dependent on the applicability of releasing of the land. But the releasing of the debts, if it is applicable everywhere. Anywhere a Jew lives, not only in the land of Israel. Everyone good so far? Okay. Okay, so the Rambam codifies this as well in source number 5. Ein Shmitat Ksafim noheget min haTorah ela bizman shayovel noheg sheyesh sham Shmitat Karka. He says, well, it's actually both of them are dependent on Yovel, right? That Shmitat Karka, releasing of the land, only applies if Yovel is in effect. And so therefore, by A equals B and B equals C, releasing of money would also only apply if Yovel applies. Yovel certainly does not apply in our days. Right, this is an oral tradition that we know this. The sages said, when Shmitat Karka is in effect, then Shmitat Ksafim, our releasing of money, is in effect, whether in every place that Jews find themselves, whether in Israel or outside of Israel. And if there is no Shemitah of the land, then there is no Shemitah of money, even in Israel. Divrei Sofrim, Shetei Shmitat Ksafim noheget bizman hazeh b'chol makom, af al pi she'en yovel noheg. Right, so the sages teach us, the rabbis teach us, that Shemitah of money should apply in our day, even though there is no Yovel. Right, the same logic, the same principle holds when it comes to Shmitat Karka, right? Shmitat Karka also, releasing of the land, exists on a Dirabanan level, on a rabbinic level, not on a Doraita level, because we don't keep track of the Yovel. And the reason why they say that it should apply on a rabbinic level is Kidei shelo tishtakeach Torat Shmitat Haksafim miYisrael, because we don't want this set of laws, the set of rules of releasing of money, be forgotten from the Jewish people. Okay, so it's not, right? He tells us very clearly it should not apply, and it applies only as a reminder. Okay, not as a generally, right? We'd say it's a suffix, it's a doubt, maybe it does, maybe it doesn't, we're not sure, we're going to observe it out of stringency. The Rambam's saying, no, it does not apply from any sense of Torah, from a Torah perspective, it totally does not apply, but it's only so that we will not forget these rules in their entirety, that we continue to do it. Okay, so it's applicable, but certainly that would indicate that it is a low-level applicability. And even more so if we look at source number 6. The Shulchan Aruch tells us, "Ein shmita ksafim noheget min haTorah, ela bizman shayovel noheget midivei sofim, shtei shmita ksafim noheget bizman hazeh mikol makom." Releasing of debts only applies on a biblical level when Yovel applies. And from the rabbis, they said that releasing of debts applies in our day, in any case, in every place. And then the Ramah, Rav Moshe Isserlis, the Ashkenazic glosses, adds, Kenhus kamata poskim, that's the consensus of halachic decisors. Aval yesh omrim, the ein shmita noheget bizman hazeh. But there are those who say that shmita doesn't apply at all in our days. V'nir'eh, she'aleim samchu b'medinot elu, she'ein nohagin din shmita klal bizman hazeh. And he says, not only is this a theoretical opinion that's out there, right? But he says, where I live, right? He's living in 16th century Krakow. Where I live, in our day and age, no one does anything about Shemitah. And it must be that they're relying on this minority opinion that Shemitah doesn't apply in our day and age. Right? And it's not only in my day and age that people have gotten lax when it comes to Shemitah, to releasing of money, to Shemitah Ksafim, but even as far back as the Rush, the great authority who lived in the 11th century, 12th century, he has a tshuva where he cries and complains that no one's doing anything about Shemitah. So there seems to be a long-standing practice that many had to, that they ignored Shemitah, right? Whether that was deliberate because they were relying on this minority opinion that Shemitah doesn't apply at all in our day and age because there is no Yovel, there is no Shemitah Karka, certainly on a Doraita level. And so maybe they were relying on a legitimate halachic position, which is what the Ramah wants to do, at least as a limud zechut, to a meritorious, judge them favorably. Or maybe they truly were just ignoring it. And so we can at least justify it with this minority opinion. So quite interesting that this went ignored for a long time, for many centuries, despite clear ruling seemingly that it should be relevant on a Durabanan level.
Wow.
Any questions on this?
Well, something related.
Yeah.
Have you studied about what they actually did in Israel during the time, during the ancient times for Shemitah, because it's so incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
So, to eat, to work, it's the rules are so stringent, and the rabbis made them, it seems to me, even more stringent than in the Torah or in the written.
So there's a lot of discussion about this, both from the agricultural perspective and from the monetary perspective. Agriculturally, we know that when the Jews returned from the first exile in Babel, that they intentionally did not sanctify all of the land so that the laws of Shemitah would not apply.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of discussion about whether some of the workarounds that we have would be effective if Shemitah were working on a D'oraisa level, right? So the Heter Mechira, selling of the land, like we sell Chametz on Pesach, there are those who say that you could do that even if Shemitah is applicable on a biblical level. So there's a lot of discussion about it. I don't know what the reality on the ground was. I'm not, we have some anecdotes in the Talmud. We'll see one example right now. But yes, clearly it was a great challenge, right? The Gemara, there's one source in the Gemara that says those who keep Shemitah are the true embodiment of faith. right? That's the greatest test of faith, is if you'll keep Shemitah. So it is recognized as a difficult thing to keep. Okay, it's a good question. Thank you. Okay, so the next Gemara tells us, right? This is dealing with rabbis who lived post the Beis Hamikdash, but this is not a Pruzbul that being described here, right? This is and it's unclear if they're talking about only when Shemitah is applicable on a D'Rabbanan level, if this would hold true on a Doraita level also. I just don't know. But there's an interesting discussion. So, Amar Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, Ha'omer l'chaveiro, al minat shelo tishmatini shvi'it mishametet. You make a loan to your friend, and you stipulate in the loan that I make this loan to you on condition that the Shemitah year does not cancel the loan. Nope, that doesn't work. Shemitah mishametet, the loan will be canceled by the Shemitah. Okay, so then there's a whole technical discussion. We don't need to worry about that. But then at the very end, the Gemara says, Almenat shelo tishmateni bashvi'it, ein shvi'it mishamtato. Almenat shelo tishmateni shvi'it mishamatato. If the stipulation is that the sabbatical year will not cancel the loan, then the loan is canceled by the sabbatical year. But if you stipulate that it will not be canceled in the sabbatical year, bashvi'it, then it's not canceled. Meaning what? Meaning if we turn the page and it gets spelled out a little bit clearer, right? I have on my house a 30-year mortgage.
Yeah, I was
If that-
thinking-
If that mortgage was taken out, was given to me by an individual, not by the bank, if it was given to me by a Jew, an individual Jew, so since it's a 30-year term, Shemitah would have no relevance. Okay, if there's a set term that's not in the Shemitah year, then the loan is still good. The lender can collect. Okay, it's only in a situation where either the term comes out during Shemitah or there was no term stipulated. Right, so the Gemara continues, right? Amar Yehuda Amar Shmuel Hamalvit Chaver le'eser shanim ein shvit mishamteto. If you make a loan for 10 years, then Shemitah does not cut off the loan. Okay, so again, go ahead.
Shemitah doesn't pause the loan for the Shemitah year. It's done, forgives the whole loan.
Correct.
You could buy a house the year before Shemitah year, take out a 30-year loan.
No,
And
no, not a 30-year loan. If you stipulate a term that's not the Shemitah year, then
Right.
it will not be canceled. But let's
Okay.
say I come to you, Cheryl, and I say, I've got this great investment property. I'm gonna, I just need to borrow, I don't know, $100,000. I'll fix it up. I'll flip it around. I'll have it sold in 6 months. What do you say, right? And this is, let's say that I come to you this coming Sukkot, right? The very first year of the 7-year cycle. I say, I'll pay you back whatever. I should have it sold in 6 months. You say, fine. And then 6 months comes and goes, and 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. We never set a term, right? We never said it must be paid back by such and such a time. If I drag it out until the next Shemitah year, then it would be canceled. But
then I'm out of luck.
if you make me that loan and you say you must pay me back, in 10 years' time, then it wouldn't be affected by Shemitah. Okay. And we could skip down that the Shulchan Aruch rules that way as well in source number 10. And let's go now to this is the example, Arthur, that I was thinking about earlier when you asked your great question. The Gemara in Gittin, and someone will tell me please when I need to scroll down on the screen for the English continuation, tells us, Hamachazir chov lechaveru b'shvi'it, tzarich sheyomar lo mishamit ani. So if, right, Cheryl made a loan to me, I come back to her during the Shemitah year, and I say, Cheryl, I want to pay you back. You're obligated to say, Mishametani, I release the debt. I'm not going to collect it. Ima Marlo, Afal Pichein, if I'm a really good guy and I say, nonetheless, I want to pay you back, even though I know you released it, Yikabel Himenu, you can take that money from me. Shene'emar v'zedavar shmita amar rabba v'tali le ad amar hachi, right? So because okay, we don't need to worry about that detail. V'tali le ad amar hachi itve abaye kishu noten lo al yomar lo bechovi ani noten lach elamot yomar lo shalihin v'matana ani noten lach. So Abaye qualifies this a little bit. He says, when I come to give you the money, Cheryl, I can't say I'm paying back my loan to you. But if I say, this is a gift, right? This is my money. I understand the debt I owe you is released. That was forgiven. But this is my money. I finally sold that house. I finally got, was able to make up whatever I had to borrow. This is my money I'm giving to you as a gift. That's when you can accept it, right? We have to really get out of the mindset that this is connected to the loan and the outstanding obligation. So if I say, if they come and say b'matana nioten lach amarle, so then you can accept it. And now we have a story. Abba bar Marti to who Abba bar Minyomi. So we have this guy whose name is Abba bar Marti or Abba bar Manyomi. Hava mesik be Rabba Zuze. He took a loan from Rabba. Aitinu nihale b'shvit, and he wants to go back and pay it during the Shemitah year. Amarle mishamet ani. So Rabba says, mishamet ani, I release you from this obligation. You don't have to pay me back. Shaklinu va'azal. Okay, so this Abba bar Manyoni is really happy. He keeps his money. He leaves. Ata Abaye ashkacha tahavi atziv. Abaye comes and sees that Rabba is quite upset. Amarle amai atziv. He says, why are you so upset? Amarle hachi hava maseh. So he tells him, well, this is what happened. Azal legabe. So now Abaye is going to try to make the peace. He goes to this Abba bar Manyomi and he says to him, Am teitle zuze lemar, amarle in, amarle umay amarlach, amarle mishametani. He says, did you borrow money from Rabba? He says, yes. He said, what did he say to you when you went to pay him back? And Abba says, well, he told me that I release you from the obligation. Amarle amartle afal pichein. Well, did you say back to him afal pichein? Like, even though you released me, I still want to give it to you. Amarle lo. So he says no. Amarle ve'i amartle afal pichein hava shaklinu minach. Well, if you would have said afal pichein, he would have taken the money from you. Hashta mihat amtinu nihale aimale afal pichein azal amtinu nihale v'amale afal pichein shaklinu mine. So he says, Abai says to this guy, you should go and tell him afal pichein. Nonetheless, I still want to give you this money, and he'll take it from you. So that's what happened. He went. He said afal pichein, and Rabba took the money. And then Rabba says, Amarla hava elo hava beidata b'hai turbim rabbanan mikara. This student, this guy, he doesn't know anything, right? This is such a basic thing that he should have known about this kind of charade we have to go through, right? Never would I have really released him of this obligation, but he didn't know the script that had been sort of accepted in order to work around it. Okay, so Arthur, to your question, again, these are people living post Beis Hamikdash, so it's only Shemitah on a Durabanan level, but very clear that Rabbah, who's one of the greatest sages of our, ever, had an expectation that he would be paid back. And so that seems to be that, generally there was that expectation. Okay, so now we come to Pruzbul. So again, we've seen up until this point that there is the notion of Shmitat Ksafim, there is the notion of releasing of debts. In our day and age, consensus is that it exists only on a Durabanan level, only rabbinically. No one makes the claim that it applies on a Doraisa level, although every time I hear a shir on this, and it's getting closer and closer to reality, Um, one trigger point for when things might become on a more Doraita level is if the majority of the Jewish people are living in Israel, and we're very close. Now, we still, according to the Rambam, would need Yovel, and whether they would be able to enact Yovel at that point, most agree they wouldn't. But we are getting to a point where it might be a little bit more severe. But anyway, in any case, certainly in our day and age, it still remains a dirabanan. It applies on a rabbinic level. We have the minority opinion of the Ramah, who says that there are those who say it doesn't apply at all, and that seems to also have been relied upon for a significant amount of time. Okay, so that's kind of the background of where we're at. And
is the requirement for Yovel only the number of people, number of Jews living in Israel compared?
Well,
does it have anything to do with the tribes?
Well, yes. So so it says when the Jews are living in their land. So most understand that to be not only a majority of Jews living in Israel, but also in their allotted portion by tribe. So that's why we probably are still in the clear. But there will certainly be minority opinions who say if Israel reaches a majority of halachic Jews, then that might be a trigger. So that'll probably be by next Shemitah. So we'll see what happens at that point. But again, majority opinions will still say it's Dirabana. And so it's partially with that. It's partially with, do they have to be living in their allotted tribal lands? And there's also the whole question about Yovel, and can we count Yovel? Does that require the Sanhedrin? Can we get on track to know when Yovel is supposed to be?
Oh, yeah.
All very interesting questions. Okay, source number 12. This is the Mishnah in Shvi'it. Pruzbul eino mishamit. If there is a Pruzbul, or the notion of Pruzbul is not canceled. This is one of the things that Hillel the elder enacted. He saw that people were not giving loans to each other. And they were in direct violation of the pasuk we saw at the beginning of the shir. Be careful lest you are of hard heart and refuse to give a loan, knowing that Shemitah is coming. Hitkin Hillel Pruzbul. So therefore he established the Pruzbul. Zeh gufo shel Pruzbul. This is how the Pruzbul works. Moserani lachem ish ploni uploni hadayanim shemavakom ploni shekol chov sheyeshli sheegbenu kolzman she'ertze. So I give to you so and so and the judges in such and such a place that any debt that is owed to me that I can collect it at any place. And the judges sign below, sign the contract, or the witnesses. Okay, so it's a very simple, sort of declaration that's made, saying that you transfer your loans to the Beis Din, and once they are given to the Beis Din, they can be collected. Right, whether the Beis Din immediately says you're our agent to collect it, or we decide that they will be collected and held by and kept by you. That's how it works. We have an alternative version of that in source number 17. Okay. Mikan Amru, Hillel Hitkin Pruzbul Mipnei Tikkun Ha'olam. So based on the directive to give a loan and not refrain because Shemitah is coming, this is the basis for Hillel enacting the Pruzbul because of Tikkun Ha'olam. Right? That's a phrase that we're all familiar with: repairing the world, doing good in the world. Shava'ata am shenimnu lehavot zeh et zeh v'ovrim al ma shekatuv b'Torah amad v'yitkin Pruzbul. So again, he saw people refraining from giving loans, and so and were in direct violation of the Torah, so he established the Pruzbul. Right, so this was just adds the concept of Tikkun Ha'olam to the Pruzbul and the impetus to enact it. Gemara in source number 13 wants to know the meaning of this term Pruzbul. My Pruzbul. Amar Rav Chisda, Prus Buli Ubut. It means Prus Buli Ubut. What does that mean? So Prus is understood to be sort of like a prize, a reward. So it's a Pros Buli Ubut. Buli Elu Ashiri. It's a prize, a reward, or a protection for the Buli. Buli refers to the rich. As it says, there's a pasuk, V'shavarti Gaon Uzchem, B'tani Rav Yosef, Elu Bula Ot Sheba Yehuda. This refers to the rich people that live in the section of Yehuda. Buti, Elu Ha'aniyim. Buti refers to the poor people. Yichtiv Ha'avet Ta'avitenu. As it says, Ha'avet Ta'avitenu, Amarle Rava, La Loza, My Pruzbul, Amarle. Okay. So Pruzbul is a protection both for the rich and for the poor. It's a protection for the poor that they'll be able to get a loan when they need it, and that they won't be shut out because Shemitah is approaching, or their lender thinks they won't be able to pay them back. And it's protection for the lender, for the rich people, that they have assurance that they will be paid back and that it won't be completely wiped out when the Shemitah year comes. The next Gemara, source number 14, let's just do this in summary, wants to know what the logic is for such a document, right? Why was Hillel able to do this? Why could he say that this Pruzbul is going to be effective, right? What's the mechanism by which it works? So the first explanation the Gemara gives is that it's a shave ve'al ta'aseh, right? That it was just a passive, right? So in order for the loan to be canceled, the lender actually has to make that declaration we saw earlier of Mishametani, I release the loan. If they don't make that declaration, so maybe they'll be in violation of the Torah when they collect it, but they're still entitled to collect it. So the first is that he just was basically saying shave al taseh. We're passively going to not require the lender to make an affirmative statement that they release the debt. And so by if you're just passively not doing something you're supposed to do, that's a very you can do that, right? It might be a sinful act or lack of act, but it's valid. It's valid to not do something, right? We can't force someone to go and sit in the sukkah on Sukkot. They'll miss out on the mitzvah, but they're right. They're not. There's no punishment for it. There's only the only punishment, the only positive mitzvah which has a punishment associated with it is there's two. It's to not do the Korban Pesach and to not do a Brit Milah. Any other positive mitzvah from the Torah, there's no punishment associated. So that's the first possible explanation, is that it's simply a shave al taseh. He's simply sort of passively ignoring this requirement that we would have otherwise done. The second explanation is hefker based in hefker. That based in is empowered to declare something ownerless, right? We're familiar, right? The court not only has the power to collect if someone owes a fine or a penalty, or enforce payments for damages done, right? But we're familiar with the notion of eminent domain, that the government is able, if there's a good public need, and there's been a lot of controversial cases about whether it really was a good public need or not, but that the government is empowered to take property from an individual in order to serve the public good. So there's a notion in halacha of hefker based in hefker, that if the court declares something to be ownerless, they're empowered to do that. So the way that would work with Pruzbul is that when someone makes a declaration of the Pruzbul, they are in essence saying that this is given over to the court, and the court then immediately declares whatever that sum of money was to be hefker, and once they declare it hefker, they can declare that it should be given to the lender, or to whoever they want to give it to, and in this case to the lender. Okay, so the second explanation is hefker based in hefker. And then if we go to source number 16, one more possible explanation for it is at the very end of this Mishnah, it says, Hamoser shtarotav lebeitin einan mishametin. If one transfers their contracts to the Beis Din, then they're not canceled by Shemitah, because money owed to the Beis Din, money owed to this public institution, is not canceled out. It's only between individuals. Okay, so that raises interesting questions we're not going to get into now. What if someone makes a pledge of tzedakah to an organization, to an institution? Is that pledge canceled by Shemitah or not? Is it only between individuals? Interesting side question. We're not going to really get into that right now. But the general consensus is that Shemitah is ben achicha, between brothers, between individuals, and so therefore, if it's given over to the Beis Din, then they still have the power to collect. Any questions on any of those explanations? So Eliezer, the Pruzbul is often celebrated as being one of the best examples of rabbinic power, and what the rabbis are able to do with a little creativity and a little will. So Eliezer Berkovitz, sort of a very common theme, but he writes, I think, powerfully, and this is much a part of his bigger philosophy of halakha and how it works. In source number 18. Where did Hillel find the authority for his innovation? Where was it written in the Torah? It was, of course, not found in any text or code. He found it within himself. It was a clash between equally valid laws, principles, and concerns of the Torah. He had to find a resolution to this conflict. There was no text, no written Torah to tell him which course to follow. He could find the solution to the problem within his own understanding of the comprehensive ethos of Judaism, as he was able to gather it in his own heart and his own conscience from the totality of the teaching and way of life of Torah. Okay, so again, just a really beautiful explanation of what halakha ideally should be when there are a serious clash of values, right? So the value being that we want people to be able to get loans when they need loans, and not wanting to totally abrogate the halakha of Shemitah altogether. One more consideration when it comes to Pruzbul and how it works is in source number 15. Pruzbul eino mishamet ve'eino nechtav ela bebeitin chashuv. Pruzbul only cancels debt and is only written in a beit din chashuv, in an important rabbinic court. Tahainu shlosha beki'im bedin u'be'inyan Pruzbul Yodin inyan shmita shmita. Right, that means judges who know the laws of Pruzbul and know the laws of Shemitah, and they are held to be experts. They've been accepted by the residents of that locale as being an authoritative court. Some say that we could write Pruzbul in any beit din. It doesn't have to be a beit din of experts. Just like on Erev Rosh Hashanah, Erev Yom Kippur, we convene a beit din for Hataras Nedarim, it could be that low-level beis din, and that would be fine. It appears to me that we can be lenient in our day and age to do it in front of any beis din. A third possibility, if you remember the first source of Pruzbul, said that either the judges or the witnesses sign. So a third possibility is that you complete the Pruzbul in front of kosher witnesses, that you will be submitting these debts, or you are giving these debts over to an established court. So the Beis Din of America, the VAD of Baltimore, the CRC, the Chicago Rabbinic Council, right? That you sign it in presence of witnesses, and then it's shipped off to an established, recognized court. And that would be, it would be logistically impossible for everyone to sign a Pruzbul with a rabbinic court. in the presence of the judges, right? We could do forms and Google or whatever, but we would need a signed document. So if you sign it in the presence of kosher witnesses, and then send that to the Beis Din, that would work as well. Okay, so either option is valid. There are times when, quote, Bate Din Chashuv, when important Beit Dins will be convening. I believe the Star K has announced times when Rabbi Heinemann and the VAD will be convening for people to complete Pruzbuls. You can rely on the Ramah and others who say that we can do it in front of a regular lightweight Beit Din, and that would require the presence of 3 kosher judges who are not related to themselves or to any of the participants, or it can be done in the presence of witnesses and then sent to the Beis Din. And you'll see that there's a link to the forms in this at the end of the sheet. The Beis Din of America has both options available. A few more important points to note before we'll stop for any questions. Number one, I took it for granted throughout this year, but I just want to make it explicitly clear that the requirement for Pruzbul applies equally to men and to women. Right? There's no, to complete it requires kosher witnesses, so that gets into whole questions that we require it to be men who are observant. But if a woman extended a loan to anyone, she must complete a Pruzbul as well if she wants to collect. There's discussion, if a husband and wife truly have joint finances and make every financial decision together, so then maybe one of them could do it on behalf of the couple. But if they operate financially independently or have their own, made their own business interactions, each would be required to do it. Pruzbul is only required to be completed by the lender. Okay, if you borrowed money, there's no need to do if you intend to pay back, you have no obligation or responsibility or mechanism to do a Pruzbul. You might want to check with your lender if they're planning on doing it or how they want to handle it. But it's only a lender that has to do it. Final points is that the Pruzbul only works for loans that are already in existence. So unlike when we declare on Kol Nidre, on Yom Kippur, right, that we are nullifying from now any vows that we're going to make in the future, Pruzbul doesn't work that way. Pruzbul only works for an actual debt that has been created. So that's why we try to do it as late as possible that people won't forget, right? So we don't want, it wouldn't be helpful if we did Pruzbul tonight, then tomorrow I make a loan to someone or I take out a loan with someone because then that would defeat the purpose, right? Presumably. So that's why we're not rushing to do the Pruzbul right away, but we'll do it. Maybe we'll set up this Sunday and the following Sunday in the shul for anyone that wants to complete a Pruzbul after Minyan on Shabbos morning. On Sunday morning, not on Shabbos morning. But that it only works for going forward. If for whatever reason you anticipate that you won't be able to get to complete a Pruzbul, you can, of course, stipulate a term for the loan to come due after Rosh Hashanah, and that would be fine also, right? So even if you say this loan is due on Som Gedalia, the 3rd of Tishrei or onward, that would be fine. You'd be able to collect. It's only, again, if there was no term stipulated where it would be cut off by the end of the Shemitah year in 2 Sundays from now. One more point. We tend to get very machmir about things and very overly cautious. So there's an ongoing debate whether, if you're not aware of any loans that you made, do you have to do a Pruzbul or not? Right? On Pesach time, I advise everyone, even if you don't have any chametz, even if you renting one room in a hotel, or you have you completely turned everything over, you've eaten everything, there's no chametz in your house, we generally say you should still do mechiras chametz because you might always have missed something. So there are certainly those who say it's a good idea to complete a Pruzbul even if you're not aware of any loans that you made because you don't want to be in violation. Others say no, that this should be a real thing. And if there are no loans that you made, there's no point in doing a Pruzbul. It's just it's a waste of time, and it's making a bigger farce out of something that should be taken seriously. Okay, I'm going to stop. Are there any questions or comments or?
Yes, Rabbi, I have a
Please.
question, please.
Yeah.
I had read in the past, I'm wondering if this is at all relevant to this, that Hillel felt compassion for the Jewish people there because of the woman who insisted on so many taxes and things, and each local procurator or whatever their title was could take as much from the population as they could get away with. I
Yeah.
mean, there was no federal or Roman central system of figuring out what taxes would be. These guys were given this territory so that they could milk it for everything they could get out of it.
Right. So there's a
and that
discussion.
there
There's a
was-
discussion about that in relation to Shmitat Karka, to working the land.
The land.
So it says the Gemara. I forget the source, but it says that because of the Roman whatever the authorities that they farmed during the Shemitah year because they knew that they were going to that this tax would be collected.
Yeah.
So, but the Shemitah Ksafim is only between Jews. So that was it could be the financial pressures led them to take this attitude that I don't want to make a loan. But I've not seen it connected directly that way, but it's certainly possible.
I mean, it doesn't, of course, vitiate the point that Rabbi Berkowitz, or if he's, I guess he's a rabbi, yeah, Rabbi Berkowitz making.
Rabbi Doctor
Berkowitz, excuse me, right? Okay, that's right. I knew that. I forgot it. Thank you. He found it within himself. Yes, that is true. But I would think that he saw that things that the problems of a group of people having to relate to one another when so many of them were already out in the diaspora and they had so many things going on in terms of their own internal pressures just because of the Romans and other things. And money can always be a way, unfortunately, of pulling people further apart from one another. And that it was really a very difficult time. Now, they had just begun to try to provide some kind of a religious education for the children because they were losing their fathers, chas v'sholom. I mean, the society itself was changing a lot, and there were orphans around after all, and things had to be done to help them, but they didn't have huge tuition payments to make. But I could well see that someone could say that these days that we've got to do something maybe about this and make some changes in it because there are people who have such high debt, and because of having to pay for schools for kids and that it is a time perhaps to reopen that discussion on this basis with this in mind, that when there is a terrific pressure on the people from outside or from inside. I mean, I'm sure those who work on committees in the schools, they're trying to anticipate not to let people be pulling apart further from one another. But I thought that maybe that would be a relevant factor to bring in, that there was unusual pressure. I mean, why did it happen with Hillel? Why didn't it happen earlier?
Right.
The point, I guess.
Yeah, all important questions and good points. I just wanted to also say there is one really interesting minhag. This is totally a minhag. There's no halachic requirement for this, but it's quoted in the Ben Ish Chai, great Sephardic posek, who says that it is a nice thing, or he might have said that this is what he did, is right after signing a Pruzbul. right after he did this Pruzbul, he would then make a loan of a couple dollars, whatever currency they were using in Baghdad. But he would make a loan of a couple dollars to someone, and then go through the same charade that we saw that Rabba went through with Abba Bar Magnoni. Say no, this is really forgiven, right? And that would be a way to, even though we're relying on this halachic workaround, that would be a way to at least at whatever level the mitzvah exists nowadays, the Rabbanan, Minhag, whatever, to be able to actively fulfill the mitzvah of Shemitah Ksafim, of releasing a debt, in a way that is, again, a little tongue-in-cheek, a little, ritualized, but I thought was a nice idea that he shared.
Another teaching moment. Yeah.
So
Rabbi, I wasn't quite clear on the statements that you made about when the loan is due. It has to be either through the Shemitah year or.
So if there's a loan, right? If you're a lender, you make a loan to someone.
Right.
If you say this, I expect payment back in 10 years from now. I expect payment back in a year from now, whatever. So if that end date is post the Shemitah,
Right.
then it's not canceled. Your borrower must pay you back. If you make a loan to someone and you don't say this is when it's, generally we would, that would be more of a lower sum. This happened to me recently. I was at a wedding and I didn't have any cash to tip the valet guy. So I asked my friend if I could borrow a couple dollars to tip the valet guy, right? So my friend said, sure, here you go. And never said you must pay me back by such and such a time. If I forget about it and then Shemitah comes, so that would be canceled. And if I tried, even if it was a bigger sum, but generally for a big loan, you would stipulate terms. But if you don't stipulate, if you don't give an end time for when the loan is going to mature, then it would be canceled at the end of the Shemitah year. Is that clear?
Better.
Okay. All right, we can talk more if you still have more questions.
Okay.
So as I said, we will convene Batei Din in Shul this coming Sunday and in 2 Sundays. Anyone that wants to complete a Pruzbul will be welcome to do so. We'll also make Hataras Nedarim available at that time. It's going to be Tivot Shalom goes to court, goes to Beis Din. I don't know if there's any other Beis Din functions that we can take care of for anyone. We'll have to see. But anyway, this is a very timely, important topic. As the Rambam says, that part of what we do, part of why it's still relevant, is that we don't want these halachot to be forgotten. So just in our discussing it tonight, we fulfilled that directive, and whether we need to complete a Pruzbul or not, we have certainly familiarized ourselves with some of the ideas and issues surrounding the Pruzbul, surrounding Shemitah Ksafim. Have a good night.
Right?
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. Rabbi.
All right.
Yashikach.
Yes, cool.
Oh,